part of your business that you need to work on. So that would be web brand. That could be any of the graphic stuff that you're doing for the website. That could be the actual structure and layout, the sales content, the funnels, any of the redirections that you're doing into different subcategories, any of that kind of stuff. And maybe you have more than one website because you have more than one product or service and you're really trying to drive people down these different funnels.
Welcome back to the Prospecting Show, where each week we talk about tips, tricks, and methods for growing an amazing small business pipeline. I'm your host, Dr. Connor Robertson, and on this podcast, you can expect segments on communication, sales, prospecting, and closing. Thank you to everyone who has supported my 100 episodes and 100 days goal going into 2020. Enjoy the show.
The Stephen Covey Quadrant of urgency and importance, and this is not a new idea, but it's one of those things that I'm starting to realize more and more myself as we're growing this business here, and I thought I would share it with anybody that thought it would be interesting. And so basically, if you imagine in your head, there's this quadrant, there's four corners to it. Urgency is one of the sides and importance is the other side. So up top you have importance, and then on the bottom you have non-important tasks. And then on the left, you have urgent tasks, and on the right, you have non-urgent tasks. And a lot of businesses, when they're starting to get going, are getting into the bottom half of the quadrant, which is non-important tasks. These are things that are interruptions and distractions. They're not going to move your business forward. They might not move it backwards, but they're definitely going to kill your time. And because of that, you should be eliminating those particular things immediately. Now, the non-important tasks would be things like answering emails, following up on text messages from basic kind of production things. Nothing to do with sales, nothing to do with putting out major fires. And because of that, there's not really room for any growth. When you move up to the important part of the actual chart, what you're going to find is that there's urgent and non-urgent. Everybody thinks that they should be focusing in the urgent category because this came up right now. It's super important to take care of. It's one of the things that's going to help me move forward. But the problem is you will never get into goals and planning if you focus all of your time in urgency. So if every morning you wake up and you have a fire, you got to put out the fire, and then by the time the fire is fixed, you go on to the next thing, which is probably a non-important task. And then you never get a chance to actually do those goals, planning, and long-term strategy. So the 6 things that I do that are in the non-urgent important category that I recommend you do every day are team building, brand building, long-term growth strategy, social, web brand, and networking. And those all seem like really generic kind of concepts, but here's the thing. If you aren't looking for the next team member to join your group or help you either on production, fulfillment, sales, whatever it is, if you don't have that next person that ready there to be with you, then you're never going to actually get to that. You're always going to be in crisis, like, oh, someone left and we have to hire someone else now. So if you spend that non-urgent time, a little bit every day looking for new team members, then you're going to be a little bit safer off and you're not going to have as many problems long term. On the flip side, you got to be also working on brand. Now, brand could be things that are mixed in with number 4 here, social, but at the same time, brand could just be anything like you're putting out content online on social platforms. You could be making phone calls and letting people know what you're doing now. You could be making changes to other online presences like directories and other areas that you list your business. This could be trade shows. This could just be having different images done, graphics done, infographics, things like that. Or you could be tying that directly into social and running TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, or any of those different platforms that are there that exist. But after you're done the social, you should immediately switch into long-term strategies, because at the end of the day, if you don't have a long-term strategy or a goal set, then you're never really going to have anything to work towards. So you should spend a little bit of time and figure out, listen, if I want to, if I have a $500 product and, you want to do $1 million in sales, what does that actually look like, right? Or you could say, I got a $1,000 product and I want to do $1 million in sales, right? Is it a one-time service or product, or is it a monthly recurring service or product? But if you make all of those long-term goals, and long-term could honestly be 1 year to 5-year goals. It doesn't have to be these like 25-year goals. Long-term being just not today, not this week, and not this month. If you break out those goals really for the year, you can take everything and go backwards. So if you said that you want to do, 1.2 million, just to make the math easier, you would just say, okay, well, I need 100K per month. So now you took your long-term goal of 1.2 million, divided it back out by 12 and got 100K per month. Then you could divide that back out by the 4 weeks and say, okay, well, that's 25K per week. And if that's basically where you're trying to get to, now you've taken your long-term goals and planned this in the morning in your non-urgent important category, because it's really important to have a goal. It's not going to change anything tomorrow, though. So that's where people have a lot of difficulty in actually getting these tasks done, because they don't happen right away. So that is where I would focus your time in the long-term, non-urgent important category. I would still really not get into the non-important category where we have interruptions and distractions, because that is extremely difficult and just a time suck for you, where you start checking emails and doing these other things that just don't make any money and don't help your customer and don't help your team, and they just don't do anything. They're just literally time sucks, right? Don't go on Facebook. Don't go send out some tweets. Don't go post a bunch of shit on Instagram that doesn't matter. Be intentful, do the brand, do the social, do all those items, but make sure that they actually have some value, and realize that they're non-urgent tasks, right? They could be important, some of them, but most of them are non-urgent. That kind of switches us over to the web brand. Again, something like writing a book, or having a sales letter, or having a web site, basically a website that's going to show what your new services are, your current services are. You have to have that web brand that exists in place, because when people go to your site and they want to learn what you're doing, they need to have an understanding of what that looks like. So because of that, that's a non-urgent but important part of your business that you need to work on. So that would be web brand. That could be any of the graphic stuff that you're doing for the website. That could be the actual structure and layout, the sales content, the funnels, any of the redirections that you're doing into different subcategories, any of that kind of stuff. And maybe you have more than one website because you have more than one product or service, and you're really trying to drive people down these different funnels. The last non-urgent important task, or probably the most important, is networking. If you don't have a strategy for outbound networking, or outbound outflow, we call it, to generate inflow, you're going to have a lot of difficulty with sustaining anything long term. And because of that, we're not going to be able to really focus on the business now, because you're always going to be worried, like, where am I going to get my next client? Where am I going to get the next person to work with? Where am I going to get the next business to start? Because you're doing none of the networking strategies long term. So my suggestion is that at least once per month, you go out to a physical in-person networking event, if that's scalable for you in your business. Maybe you're too small, or maybe you're too big at this point to have the time, to do that. You might have to go online, or do a podcast, or do some other type of content. But I still recommend you do things in person, because there's nothing better than a handshake. And it just seems to be that a lot of the business that we've done, a lot of the great partnerships we've came to, have been exclusively from trade show type events. So just to recap here, we got team. Always be looking for a team in your non-urgent important time. Build your brand, which could be anything from digital content to print content to tying that in with social, which is our fourth item. Long-term strategy, so these are your goals, financial goals or time goals or whatever they are. Web brand, so make sure that your website or your funnels are really tied into what you're doing. And then the last part's networking, making sure that the people that you meet are going to be able to either help you grow your business, or you're going to help them grow their business. Pretty much everything else in between doesn't really matter. You could have the best product or service out there. If it doesn't make money, or save time, nobody's interested in buying it. So that's not going to be a very useful approach. So overall, spend the time to do these 6 things, non-urgent, important. And then the last piece is, when do you do these? Every single morning I would do these before you start tackling all the other stuff, because if you start doing this later, you will always find something that you think is urgent, important, that's going to fill in that space where you're not going to be able to actually go any further. So make sure you take care of the non-urgent, important stuff first, then flip over to the urgent, important, put out all the fires that are in the business at that particular time. And then honestly, just eliminate quadrant 3 and 4, which are, non-important tasks that are urgent and non-important tasks that are non-urgent. Don't worry about any of those. Those are your interruptions and distractions. They're not moving you forward. They're definitely moving you backwards. So don't spend any time there. Make sure you're focusing on team, brand, long-term strategy and goals, social, web brand, and networking, and really nothing else. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. Hope you have a great day.